The morning rush at Oak and Steam Coffee always hit like a wave. The door chimed non-stop as commuters poured in, heels clicking, coats brushing, voices overlapping in a low, constant hum. The air smelled of espresso and steamed milk, sharp and comforting all at once, cups stacked and unstacked. Orders were called out, repeated, corrected. The line curled past the pastry case and almost to the door. Behind the counter, Lena Whitmore worked fast. White, mid-20s, hair pulled into a tight ponytail, jaw set in the practiced expression of someone already tired before 9 a.m. She had been on bar since 6, and the rhythm of the job had flattened her patience thin. "Next," she called, fingers already reaching for a cup. A man stepped forward. Daniel Carter was black, early 40s, neatly dressed in a dark coat despite the mild weather. He carried himself with quiet restraint, shoulders squared but relaxed, as if he'd learned long ago not to take up more space than necessary. In one hand, he held his phone. In the other, a folded receipt from an earlier order. "Good morning," Daniel said. His voice was calm, measured. "I think there's been a mix-up with my drink." Lena didn't look up at first. She grabbed a marker and glanced at the screen. "What was the name?" she asked. "Daniel," he replied. "I ordered a soy latte, extra hot. This one," he lifted the cup slightly, "has regular milk." Lena finally looked at him. Her eyes flicked from his face to the cup and back again. She exhaled through her nose. "We're slammed," she said. "Are you sure it's yours?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, I watched it being made." Lena rolled her eyes. Just slightly, but enough. "People always think they know," she muttered, already reaching for the cup. She sniffed the lid. "Looks fine to me." Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply said, "I can't have dairy." That should have been enough. It wasn't. Lena set the cup down a little harder than necessary. "Okay, but we make a lot of drinks. If you grabbed the wrong one—" "I didn't," Daniel said quietly. Behind him, the line shifted. Someone sighed loudly. Another customer checked their watch. Lena felt the pressure mount, irritation buzzing at the base of her skull. "Sir," she said, her tone flattening, "if we remade every drink someone felt was wrong, nothing would ever get done." Daniel's jaw tightened for just a second. Then he relaxed it again. "I'm not asking for special treatment," he said. "I'm asking for the drink I paid for." Lena glanced at the register. "Receipt?" Daniel unfolded the paper and slid it across the counter without a word. Lena didn't pick it up right away. Instead, she gave him a look, the kind she'd given 100 times before, the look that said, "Here we go again." The look reserved for customers she'd already decided were going to be a problem. "Soy latte," she said skeptically, finally reading the slip. "Extra hot." She paused, just for a beat. Her eyes flicked back to the cup in her hand, then to the receipt, then to the order screen behind her. Something didn't line up. She frowned. Behind the bar, the espresso machine hissed loudly. A coworker called out another name. The line shifted again. Lena swallowed and picked up the cup, turning it slowly. Written on the side, in her own handwriting, was a name. Not Daniel. And not soy. Her stomach dropped. She turned the receipt over, then checked the timestamp. The drink Daniel held had been made after his order, using whole milk, for a completely different customer. For the first time since he'd stepped up to the counter, Lena felt heat creep up her neck. Not from stress, but from something sharper. Realization. She looked at Daniel again. He hadn't smirked. He hadn't crossed his arms. He hadn't said, "I told you so." He just stood there, patient, waiting to be believed. And suddenly, the eye roll from seconds ago felt louder than the espresso grinder. Because the receipt in her hand was about to reveal more than just a mix-up. It was about to show exactly who hadn't been listening, and why. Lena stared at the receipt longer than necessary, as if the paper might somehow rearrange itself and spare her the conclusion already forming in her mind. The black ink was clear. too clear. Soy latte, extra hot. Daniel. She looked back at the cup in Daniel Carter's hand, then at the faint marking on the side of the cup she'd dismissed without really reading. Wait, circled once. Whole milk, not soy, not his. Her throat tightened. She started, then stopped. The line behind Daniel was quiet now, the way it gets when tension becomes noticeable. A few customers leaned subtly forward, curiosity replacing impatience. Lena cleared her throat. Let me just check something. She turned away from Daniel and walked 2 steps down the counter, pulling the next drink ticket from the rail. Her fingers moved faster than her thoughts, matching times, names, milk types. There it was. The drink Daniel had been handed belonged to Emily, ordered 30 seconds later. Whole milk, regular temperature. Lena felt the heat in her face deepen. She had rolled her eyes at the wrong person. She turned back slowly. Yeah, she said, her voice noticeably softer now. You're right, this isn't yours. Daniel nodded once, not smug, not relieved, just steady. Thank you for checking, he said. The simplicity of it stung. Lena reached for a clean cup, suddenly very aware of every movement. I'll remake it right now. Soy. Extra hot. As she turned toward the espresso machine, she caught her reflection in the stainless steel. Jaw tight, eyes unsettled. Her co-worker, Maya, glanced at her from the milk fridge, eyebrows raised. What happened? Maya asked quietly. I mixed up the cups, Lena muttered. Maya's gaze flicked to Daniel, then back to Lena. She didn't say anything, but the look was enough. Lena worked in silence. She steamed the soy milk carefully this time, watching the thermometer climb. She wiped the steam wand twice. She pulled the espresso shot again, slower, more deliberate. Behind her, Daniel waited at the counter, hands resting lightly on the edge. He could feel the shift in the room, the way people were suddenly listening. The way the barista who'd brushed him off was now careful, almost cautious. A woman 2 places back whispered to her friend, "That happens to me all the time." Daniel pretended not to hear. Lena set the finished drink down and slid it toward him. Soy latte, she said. Extra hot. I'm sorry about that. Daniel picked it up but didn't leave right away. He looked at the cup, then back at her. I know mornings are busy, he said calmly. I wasn't trying to make it harder. The words landed heavier than an accusation. Lena nodded, unable to meet his eyes for a moment. I shouldn't have assumed, she admitted. There it was. Small. Late, but real. Daniel gave a faint smile. Not warm, not cold, just tired. It happens. He turned and walked away, blending back into the flow of the cafe. But Lena stayed frozen behind the counter. Because the mix-up hadn't been complicated, the receipt hadn't been unclear, and the mistake hadn't started with milk. It had started with a look, an assumption, a decision made before she ever bothered to listen. And for the rest of the shift, every time Lena reached for a cup, she saw that receipt in her mind and wondered how many times before this she'd never bothered to check. The rest of the morning moved forward, but for Lena Whitmore, time no longer flowed the same way. Orders were called. Cups slid across the counter. The espresso machine hissed and screamed like it always did. Customers came and went, most of them forgetting her face the moment they walked out the door. But Lena couldn't forget Daniel Carter. She kept replaying the interaction in her head, not just the moment she realized the mistake, but the seconds before it. The eye roll, the tone, the way she'd decided, instantly and without evidence, that he was wrong. She'd been wrong. A few minutes later, Maya leaned closer while restocking lids. You okay? Maya asked quietly. Lena nodded too quickly. Yeah, just tired. Maya studied her for a second longer, then said, That guy was polite. You didn't have to be defensive. The comment wasn't sharp. It wasn't accusing. That somehow made it worse. I know, Lena said. I just assumed. Maya didn't press. She rarely did. But as she walked away, Lena felt the weight of that word settle deeper in her chest. Assumed. An hour later, the rush slowed. The line shortened. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, warming the wooden tables. Lena wiped down the counter, her movements slower now, less automatic. She found the receipt again. It was still sitting by the register, folded once, just as Daniel had handed it to her. She hadn't thrown it away. She hadn't meant to keep it either. It had simply stayed there, like evidence. She unfolded it. Daniel, soy latte, extra hot. So clear, so ordinary. Her eyes drifted to the timestamp again. She followed the order numbers in her head, reconstructing the moment. There had been no confusion, no rush so extreme she couldn't read, just a choice. Lena leaned her elbows on the counter and stared at the floor. She thought about how often customers challenged her, how many times she'd been talked down to, snapped at, blamed for things outside her control. Somewhere along the way, she'd started deciding in advance who was going to be trouble. And without ever saying it out loud, without ever consciously admitting it, certain people fell into that category faster than others. Daniel hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't demanded a manager. He hadn't insulted her. He'd just said, "I can't have dairy." And she'd treated that like an inconvenience. The door chimed again. Lena looked up instinctively and felt her stomach flip. Daniel Carter had come back in. He stood near the pastry case this time, scanning the shelves. No tension, no hesitation, just a man deciding whether he wanted a muffin. Lena's first instinct was to look away. Her second was stronger. She stepped away from the bar and walked around the counter, stopping a few feet from him. "Hey," she said. Daniel turned, surprised. "Yes?" "I wanted to—" She stopped, exhaled, then tried again. "I wanted to say I'm sorry, for earlier, not just for the drink." Daniel studied her face, searching for something. Sincerity maybe, or just effort. "I get a lot of coffee," he said. "Mistakes happen." "This wasn't just a mistake," Lena said quietly. "I didn't listen to you, and that wasn't fair." The cafe hummed around them, but for a moment it felt like the space had narrowed. Daniel nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that." He picked up a muffin and set it on the counter. Lena rang it up without rushing this time. As she handed him the bag, she said, "On the house." Daniel hesitated, then accepted it with a small nod. "I appreciate that." He paused, then added, "For what it's worth, I almost didn't say anything earlier. Most people don't like being questioned." Lena felt that land. "I should have welcomed it," she said. Daniel gave her a faint smile. "Maybe next time." When he left, the door chimed softly behind him. Lena stood there for a moment, receipt still folded in her pocket now, like a reminder she wasn't ready to throw away. Because the mix-up hadn't just revealed an error, it had exposed a habit. And once seen, it wasn't something she could unsee. The afternoon light softened as it stretched across the cafe. The sharp edge of the morning rush finally dulled. The grinders were quieter now. The line had thinned to a handful of regulars lingering over laptops and half-finished cups. For Lena Whitmore, the shift should have felt easier. It didn't. She moved through the motions, wiping counters, calling names, steaming milk, but everything felt slower, more deliberate. Each customer's face registered more clearly than it had before. Each order felt heavier, like it carried more than just caffeine. At one point, a woman at the register corrected Lena gently. "Actually, I asked for oat milk, not almond." Lena didn't sigh. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't assume. She smiled and said, "Thanks for catching that. I'll fix it." And she meant it. During her break, Lena sat alone at a small table near the back, coffee untouched in front of her. She pulled the folded receipt from her pocket again, smoothing it flat against the wood. Daniel, soy latte, extra hot. Such a small thing, such a clear thing. She thought about how close she'd come to dismissing him completely, how easily the interaction could have ended with him walking away unheard, drinking nothing, maybe feeling smaller than he had when he walked in. She imagined him leaving without pushing back. Imagined herself never checking the receipt, never knowing. That thought unsettled her more than the mistake itself, because it meant the truth didn't always surface. Sometimes it just walked out the door. Near the end of her shift, Lena's manager, Tom, stopped by the bar. "Hey," he said casually, "everything good today?" Lena hesitated. Then, surprising herself, she said, "I messed up this morning." Tom raised an eyebrow. "How?" "I dismissed a customer when I shouldn't have," she said. "The drink was wrong, and I didn't believe him at first." Tom watched her carefully. "But you fixed it." "Yes," Lena said. "But that wasn't the point." Tom nodded slowly. "That happens. What matters is whether you learn from it." Lena thought of Daniel's calm voice, his patience, the way he'd waited to be believed. "I did," she said, and this time she was sure. When her shift ended, Lena stepped outside into the late afternoon air. The street buzzed with movement. Cars, bikes, people carrying their lives in bags and backpacks. She stood there for a moment, letting the noise wash over her. She wondered how many times she'd been on the other side of that counter in her life. How often she'd needed someone to listen and felt brushed off instead. She wondered how many people carried stories like Daniel's quietly, collecting moments like this one without ever being asked about them. Lena folded the receipt one last time and dropped it into the trash by the door. Not because she wanted to forget, but because she didn't need the paper anymore. The lesson had already settled in. Inside the cafe, another barista called out an order. Lena turned back once, watching the steam rise, the cups slide across the counter, the ordinary world continuing as it always had. But for her, something had shifted. From now on, she would read the receipt. She would check the cup, and most importantly, she would listen first. Because sometimes the smallest mix-up isn't about coffee at all. It's about who gets believed.